Sukuna's plan for Megumi is finally revealed. Chapter 212's title is translated as Fester, but it's meant to be pronounced in the same way as Ripen, matching the title of 211. A fun word trick from Akutami, with seemingly opposite terms being spoken in the exact same way. Something festering or ripening could boil down to a matter of perspective. As the chapter begins, we get into a flashback of Sumiki and Megumi's reunion. This is the first time she woke up from her coma, prior to her brother and friends getting involved in the culling game to try and save her. Sumiki is being wheeled out to a hospital lobby in a wheelchair, seemingly too weak to stand or even push it herself. But even like this, after being unconscious for so long, she can recognize Megumi. The new head of the Seinen clan is sitting alone in the waiting room, arms folded, like he was planning to meet a friend after hours at the train station. This has to be an emotional moment for Megumi. His sister finally conscious once again after so long. But when she rolls up, he just gives her a quick "yo" as a greeting. It's as close to happiness as we'll probably get from him, considering everything else going on in his life. Sumiki doesn't seem offended. If anything, she looks like she's struggling to suppress a laugh. She's got to be pretty familiar with her brother's moody facade. She asks Megumi how long it's been since she was cursed and fell into that deep sleep. From her perspective, it's like no time at all has passed. She really was just asleep. This is interesting, because it's both like when you get put under anesthesia for surgery, but also the issue that Gojo is still having within the prison realm. And this turns out to be pretty important. Regardless, Megumi can tell Sumiki the exact amount of time she's been in the coma, 1 year and 7 months. He doesn't even have to think to remember that. It's clear that he's kept his sister in his heart since she fell into that darkness. All Sumiki can do is laugh. It's bleak, but it makes sense of her current situation. Her limbs are stiff, and it's hard for her to walk. That's a real world thing. After a long time spent in a coma, your muscles tend to weaken and atrophy due to disuse. Anyone would need time to recover after that. Megumi doesn't wait too long before bringing the subject around to the big question. Did you hear about the culling game? At that, Sumiki's happy grin finally fades. She regretfully looks down, visibly upset. She's already familiar with the basic situation at this point. She also mentions knowing about what happened to Gojo, being sealed and all that. Sumiki then adds, "Even though I always knew you two had a hard job," before trailing off. She was more than aware of just how dangerous a Jujutsu sorcerer's work could be, but she never would have dreamed of how bad things had gotten while she was out. Not wanting to burden his sister when she's just woken up, Megumi tells her not to worry about the whole situation. After all, he and his friends will handle it somehow. He didn't manage to come off as too convincing, what with having no plan and no details, but no one ever said social skills were his strong suit. I mean, this guy sent Maki Seinen to handle a diplomatic negotiation. He suggests that Sumiki rest some more and leave all the dangerous work to them. Sumiki does not look impressed by this. She frowns at her brother, obviously skeptical. But after a second's pause, she laughs, placing a hand to her face to try and muffle the chuckle. Sumiki jabs at Megumi, pointing out that he hasn't changed. He can put up that cool, detached facade all he wants, but he's still the stubborn, overly protective brother he was almost 2 years ago. As we return to the present, Yuji contemplates what he has left to do. And boy is it a lot. But he's grateful. Once he's done, Megumi and his sister will both be okay. They got through the culling game to finally save someone. With a serious and determined look on his face, Yuji reflects on the next step here. Once they've got Sumiki out of the game, they'll have Angel erase Sukuna and his vessel from existence. With that done, they'll be bound to make good on their promise. That way, Gojo will finally be released from his box at long last. In his mind, if he can do all that, then Gojo will ensure the world is back where it needs to be. And we see this through his imagined perception of the blindfolded man posing confidently on a pile of bodies, likely reincarnated sorcerers or anyone working alongside Kenjaku. Even after all this time, Yuji is still wishing that Gojo was here to solve his problems. That may finally be within reach now. But Yuji's thoughts don't end on that optimistic tone, sadly. He regrets having come this far after eating that first finger of SUKUNA'S. A lot of people have died because of that decision. As such, Yuji figures everything would have worked out better if he had vanished after being saved by Megumi. It would have been a lot simpler that way. No more Sukuna, no more complications, no more guilt. But no more friends. We then get a heartwarming view of both Megumi and Gojo prior to the events of Shibuya and the culling game ruining everything. If nothing else, Yuji is thankful for having been in their lives and working together with them for so long. He even admits that he's already received more than enough, accepting the fate that he's known was on the horizon. He's ready for his death. But having Sumiki cut through his thoughts without a rule probably wasn't anything Yuji could have expected. Sure, some of us worried that she was possessed by some nefarious ancient sorcerer working with Kenjaku. But we hadn't had any real evidence of that until now. Just cynicism. Now though, that's been proven a terrifying reality. Megumi's eyes are wide. Tsumiki asks for players to be able to freely enter and exit the colonies. Yuji's utterly incredulous, huh? Reflects us all. Things are spiraling out of control. However, Kogane immediately accepts Tsumiki's rule, taking the 100 points she was meant to use to leave the game. The little demon looks downright enthusiastic at this new rule. The older Fushiguro has no interest in being saved and is willing to throw away that chance. Whoever this person is, she's no innocent schoolgirl. It's clear she's someone far older, and she's got a plan. With a smile that looks more deadly than warm, Tsumiki explains that players should be able to choose their own battlefields, and that's why she chose that specific rule. Megumi's finally, truly, lost all traces of his trademark cool. He's sweating, eyes wide, clearly freaking out. His beloved sister has been taken over by some ancient sorcerer. There wasn't any way out of this in the plan. What could he do about this? Desperately, he asks, "Who are you?" hoping that she'll deny what is suddenly becoming very apparent. Within a darkness deeper than any of the 10 shadows comes a voice and a terrifying laugh that he certainly doesn't recognize. Tsumiki almost unhinges her jaw, ready to bust a gut with laughter. She calls out, "I'm your big sister," her body barely able to contain the hilarity of this transparent lie. Megumi can feel a chill spread down his spine. It's exactly what they feared. This isn't his sister, it's another past sorcerer, reborn. That's when we're reminded that incarnated sorcerers receive information about the world from the vessel that they acquire. They have a modern vessel's body after all. They can find out any necessary facts or events they need through their brain. Perfect examples of this are Hajime Kashimo, Sukuna, and others like Angel. As soon as they arrived, they understood everything and could function as necessary without any hangups. But that kind of total access opens up a frightening possibility. Following this logic, we realize that impersonating the vessel should be entirely possible. The possessing sorcerer simply has to read their host's memories sufficiently. Not every reincarnated sorcerer would try this. There's no way Sukuna, the proud king of curses, would ever pretend to be Yuji. But whatever possessed Tsumiki was smart enough to be far more subtle. With all that in mind, Megumi is putting this all on himself. He made the assumption that his sister was an awakened player. That was the better outcome. She'd be a sorcerer able to defend herself. Her being a vessel for a cursed spirit? Well, Megumi knows that there aren't any great ways out of this situation. His look of despair, with dark lines across the panel, really makes it seem like he's been trapped and utterly broken by this revelation. Fake Tsumiki adds on a "just kidding" with a cute pose and grin. Yuji, just as stunned, can't help but ask Megumi for an explanation, but there isn't any to give. He's frozen with shock, grinding his teeth while Yuji calls his name again. This situation has suddenly gotten extremely bad. The sorcerer spirit introduces themselves as Yoruzu, wondering whether the other incarnated players would remember them. It's interesting that they didn't have as great a reputation as someone like Sukuna, but Megumi is still panicking. He can't get over the fact that he fell into this trap and believed that Yoruzu was his sister this whole time. Yoruzu explains that her brother and his friends told her everything they needed to know about the culling game and their plan to have Tsumiki removed from the barrier. But all Yoruzu wanted was the points, so they kept in character until the moment was right to cash out. With a sharp glint in Yoruzu's eyes, they say, "My first battle in 1,000 years. I want to choose a place and opponent." And who exactly could it be besides Sukuna, right? She's aiming right for the top. It's not enough that people like Kashimo want to fight the guy. Now we have this mystery challenger. Yoruzu takes that moment to form a set of insect wings from her back, veins snaking outward as glittering panes of membrane form behind them. Perhaps this is a hint to her identity. The fly sorcerer? As the strange intruder flutters up into the air, still smiling mischievously, the three below can't help but watch in shock at this turn of events. They need to intervene, but what could they do right now? Yoruzu says that they'll be waiting, saying farewell to the group with a coy grin and flies off, high above even the skyscrapers. She's going fast too, moving like a bolt through the sky. Kuroshu and Yuji don't wait to react, rushing after the fake Tsumiki at full speed. Even without a plan, it's clear they have to do something. They can't just let Yoruzu leave with Tsumiki's body. But then, enchain. That one ominous word brings Yuji to a screeching halt. Behind his eyes, something shifts. Remember that binding vow he made with Sukuna way back when Yuji died in season 1? Well, the King of Curses took his time, waiting for the perfect moment to use this ultimate card. Yuji, the poor guy, didn't even remember accepting a deal with the evil cursed spirit. That was in the terms after all. And since it's been so long, we get a reminder as to where it came from, reminding us that Sukuna gets to use Yuji's body for an entire minute. All he needed to do was chant that one word. With no time to spare, Sukuna grips Kuroshu by the neck, putting pressure on her throat while holding his other arm against her back. It's a quick, efficient way to take someone down non-lethally. Kuroshu's eyes roll back as she loses consciousness. As the pseudo-angel collapses to the ground mid-stride, Sukuna falls into a slide to catch her. The sorcerer lays her down, noting the conditions of the vow he made with Yuji. He cannot hurt or kill anyone within the minute of control. Even Kuroshu scraping her knee due to falling to the ground would technically violate Sukuna's oath. Meanwhile, Megumi watches from across the roof, still processing everything that has happened with Sumiki, and now having to deal with an almost fully manifested Sukuna too. His day has gone from terrible to awful, like rubbing salt in an open wound. Sukuna looks pleased to see Megumi, smiling at him with a predatory look. Megumi just questions why Sukuna chose this moment to finally show himself. But without really answering, Sukuna instead explains that what he has planned is a gamble. He's been stuck in Yuji for a while with no way to experiment on his powers. Even the King of Curses can't have everything 100% guaranteed to work. He stretches out his left arm, focusing as much curse energy as he can on his pinky finger. It turns the flesh dark and menacing, starting to wrinkle a little. Without a second thought, Sukuna uses his other hand to twist and rip the finger away. He continues to grin like a madman as he blood splatters across the air with the loss of the digit. The first step of this plan has worked. Megumi just stands there, watching Sukuna, bewildered. He can't even begin to figure out what's happening with so many changes stacking on top of each other. Sukuna laughs after looking closely at the removed finger, clearly happy about the result of his little experiment. Yuji is the perfect vessel after all. Sukuna was finally able to take advantage of that, turning the boy's finger into one of his own. He has created a 21st finger. The ancient sorcerer takes a second to appreciate his masterwork, making sure it truly worked. But then his glee returns. It's a chuckle at first, but then Sukuna laughs at the top of his lungs. He shouts to the sky with a crazed smile. Incredible! What a thoroughly foolish brat! If Yuji had considered including his own body in the rule to cause no harm, Sukuna would have lost all means of continuing with his plan. But as we saw earlier, Yuji believes he should have been long since dead, from back when he ate the first finger. So there's no way he would have worried about himself. In fact, we could say that he hopes Sukuna would somehow destroy him too if given control. Megumi finally gets himself back on track when he sees Sukuna celebrating his situation, and he prepares to use 10 Shadows technique once again. He can't afford to hold back against the King of Curses. Specifically, he's making the hand signs for a creature we saw back in Shibuya, who Sukuna himself had to face when Megumi lost consciousness. He starts to call out Mahoraga once again, relying on the undefeatable Shikigami to take down the strongest curse who ever lived. But Sukuna is one step ahead of Megumi, aware of that little play since he did it before. Only this time, his response is going to be 1,000 times more devastating. Sukuna zips over to Megumi, stopping the summoning movements in time to keep him from calling on Mahoraga. Fushiguro wasn't ready for Sukuna to interrupt him so quickly. Instead of a follow-up strike, however, Sukuna grabs the young sorcerer by the jaw, pushing his mouth open wide. He's like some kind of bizarre parent, trying to get his child to swallow his vegetables. Instead, Sukuna claps his remaining hand over Megumi's mouth. The sorcerer's eyes go wide as he's forced to swallow. Overwhelmed by the King of Curses' bodily invasion, Megumi's face says it all. Seconds later, Yuji can hear Sukuna's voice, teasing him as he opens his eyes. Don't you remember? We'll be able to see something interesting. At this point, with the contract fulfilled, Yuji might finally remember those words. If he does, it's just going to make this moment 1,000 times worse. Itadori looks grim as he takes in the scene. Megumi is right there. He doesn't look hurt. Yuji reaches for him, hesitant, unsure of what's going on here. But the voice that comes out of Fushiguro's mouth isn't human. It's the same voice that had just been speaking. Sukuna's voice, as he says, brat. Something only the King of Curses calls Yuji. It is already too late. Megumi now has 4 eyes, the sly grin, and the tribal-looking facial marks that are specific to Sukuna. All Yuji can do is stare on in disbelief and horror, seeing the friend that he wanted to save, now cursed with the monster that was just inside him. The monster that can only be removed by killing its host. Jujutsu Kaisen with the heat. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.